Hey, this is Mike from Minimal 3DP, and today I'm taking a look at wall width. So let's go ahead and get started. My favorite slicer by far is Orca Slicer, and I've done a whole series of video on Orca Slicer, from basic setup and tutorials to looking at advanced features such as rate flow smoothing. Now, what I'm looking at today is I've started to think about how I'm doing my prints and the quality I'm getting. One of my newest printers is a Creality K2 Plus, and I actually have two other Core XY printers now that are pretty dang fast, much faster than Bed Slinger. When I was running mostly Bed Slingers, I really optimized my settings and line width to get things to print as fast as possible. At this point, I'm starting to question, why am I always trying to go faster? Is saving maybe on a 30-minute print 3 minutes really that important to me? Or is it more important to have a high-quality print that's accurate and as strong as it can be? So in this video, I'm going to look at line width, which is a key component to part strength. And we'll take a look at what the quote-unquote ideal settings are. So let's take a look at Orca Slicer. I have it open here on screen, and you'll see here I have it on line width, and I'm looking under quality, and I have advanced activated. And you can see all these various line widths, and these are the settings that I've used pretty much to go as fast as humanly possible. And I've done a lot of research. I've gone over to Orca Slicer's wiki, and let me call that up. And they have an extensive wiki that goes over the ins and outs and tips for line width. Now, interestingly enough, if you look at this article, it talks about the best line width and some sizes. And it talks about both in terms of a width in millimeters and a width in percentage. And it turns out that I've done some research, and a lot of sites actually have everything explained as a percentage as opposed to actual millimeter. So in Orca Slicer, there's the default value, and that's the size that's used, or the line width that's used, for all the features in the print except ones you specifically specify. And you typically want this to be a wider line. You want it to be, if you're using a 0.4 nozzle, you probably should start off testing a 0.5 line width. And that's a good balance between speed and strength. That wider line is actually better for the strength because you'll have more overlap in between your walls. The more overlap you have between the walls, and we show a picture. We look down here, you'll see this picture of two walls, and you'll see the yellow here. The yellow is basically voids. And if you make that line wider and have better squish, they actually blend together a little bit more and eliminate some of those voids. The more these are together, the better your strength of your part's going to be. Also, with a wider line, when you have case like on the top of a model where you have that stair step effect, it'll actually look better with that thicker line. Now, looking at our other values, and we'll look at this in Orca Slicer, you have first layer. Now, first layer, I'm expressing it as a percentage here. And first layer is, you want this thicker than your nozzle diameter, because again, you want that good squish, and you want it to adhere to the bed. You want a thick outer line because that makes the wall stronger. Inner lines doesn't matter as much, but again, it's still thicker than the nozzle width. Here I have 0.5 for inner top surface, spare infill, solid infill, and then also support. And there's several mistakes here once I started doing research that I want to point out, that these thick lines aren't necessarily good for, or I need to do something a little bit different. Now, if I slice this model, you'll notice with my default settings, it's about 32 minutes, 27 seconds. Now let's take a look at a new set of settings. Here is the spreadsheet I put together for reference on the various suggested line widths based on the literature and Orca Slicer's wiki. First thing I'm going to point out is that in most instances, pretty much everything I've read said the default line width should not be under 105%. With a 0.4 nozzle, 105% translates to 0.42. So that gives you what your minimum should be. Now, in my case, based on the balance of speed, quality, and strength, there's a suggestion of 0.5. So I'm just going to go with 0.5 for my default line width. And you can see here, I've expressed it as a percentage. You'll also see that the suggestions I found went from anywhere from 105 to 150% of nozzle width. And 150%, I should point out, is 0.6. So looking at the default, I left that at 0.5. For the first layer, most of the literature suggested something thinner than what I was doing. I was doing approximately 1.5, but they suggest something thinner. And in my case, I was also doing my first layer as thicker anyway. And so it was sort of not really doing anything for me to make that first layer, the line wider. Also, I should point out too, that when you look at the top surface, you actually want the widths to be thinner as well. Now, if we keep looking through these values, we'll see that the first layer is between 105 and 115, and I chose 110. The outer wall, the suggested value you'll find in a lot of various references is at that 150%. And they say that wider line will help the model be stronger, more accurate. It'll also help with scarf seams to make those less visible. Now, you'll also find some references that go from 105 to about 120%. So you can play around with that value. I like 0.6. It seems to work well for me. Inner wall, you're pretty much good with the default value. So again, 0.5. The top surface, you want that line width to be smaller. With that smaller line width, you'll have a much smoother surface and it'll just have a better appearance. So again, you want that line to be thinner. In my case, I had it thicker. Might explain why I've had some issues with some models looking very much having that step effect. Now, sparse infill, you're good with the default. Internal solid infill, again, that default value, so 0.5. And lastly, and this is unlike some of the other suggestions, there's a suggestion of actually going less than the nozzle diameter. The reason why you want to go less than the nozzle diameter is this is actually going to make weaker lines and a weaker model. In the case of support, we actually want it weaker. If it's weaker, it's easier to take off. In my case, I had been using a thicker line because I want everything to print quick, and might explain why I'm spending so much extra time picking pieces of filament off my overhangs, because the support was adhering too well. So that going with a thinner line, such as 0.38 or 95%, will help make your support easier to come off. Now, all of these values should be experimented with. Let's go over and take a look at Orca Slicer and see how this affects the print speed. So I've loaded up my old defaults, and let's slice this benchy. And right now this takes 32 minutes, 10 seconds. So that's fairly quick, and that's on the K2 Plus. Now let's switch over to the profile I created with the suggested line widths. And let's slice that model. And you'll notice that all I've done is added, it looks like about 7 seconds. So I've just added a tiny little bit of time. And in theory, I've increased the quality of this model as well as the strength. And I've also optimized for the support so it'll come off easier. Now, real quickly, we'll switch over and take a look at the actual prints to see if we can notice any significant quality differences. So I have my 2 benchies here. Now I'm just going to point out on both of these, I have a little bit of a ding here. Let's see if I can turn on my light. Yeah, there we get a little bit better light. So there's a little bit of a ding there, but it's actually showing up on both my models. And I actually think what's happening is I'm having an issue with the printer. You can see it real bad on this side, but it's actually happened with both models. Now, I will point out that it's worse on my initial settings and better on my second run. Now, if I look at the model, ignoring the little hiccup there, you really can't tell a difference. Or at least I can't. Now, what I'm seeing is maybe in the new settings here, particularly if I'm looking up on the chimney here, I'm seeing less layer lines. Now, I definitely, my K2 Plus, probably need to lubricate it, and that might eliminate some of this little bit of imperfections. And I think that's more to do with tuning than my new settings. Now, looking at this, I really am going to keep these settings. I'm pretty pleased with this, and for a couple of seconds difference, I think it's worth it. Now, I don't have a good way of doing a tension test and checking the tensile strength of the models, but just based on the literature and even the scientific articles I took a look at, it really looks like that line width and how I have it set up should actually have generated stronger models for me. So I'm just going to go with the research rather than actually testing that part of it. So just something to keep in mind, that it may be time to look at your line width settings and maybe optimize those for not just speed, because all of us do want to go faster, but also optimize for both strength and quality. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you have any questions or comments or different ideas about settings, please contact me. Also, I've put all these values in my Clipper calibration spreadsheet, and you're more than welcome to take a look at that and see if it'll help you. Again, you have a good night, and hopefully if you like this video, you'll like or subscribe. I'll talk to you again soon.